The day I agreed to marry a man I had never met, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room with $43 in my bank account and my little brother's surgery scheduled for the following morning. Let me say that again, because I need you to understand the geometry of desperation before you judge any decision I made after that moment. $43. Marcus's surgery at 7 a.m. A bill on the hospital's system for $62,000 that my insurance had denied 3 times, citing a pre-existing condition clause in language so deliberately obscure that I had paid a lawyer $400 I didn't have to explain it to me, and the lawyer had explained it, and the explanation was, "You're not covered, and there is nothing I can do." I am Zara Mitchell. I am 28 years old. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a house that was always one bad month away from a crisis. And I had spent the better part of my adult life making sure that bad months didn't happen, which meant working 2 jobs and sending money home and never, not once, allowing myself the luxury of believing that things would simply work out, because things did not simply work out for people like me in circumstances like mine. Things worked out because you made them work out, because you showed up early and stayed late and anticipated problems before they became emergencies and built backup plans for your backup plans. I was exceptional at all of this. I had been exceptional at all of this for years. And then Marcus collapsed at basketball practice on a Tuesday afternoon, and the MRI showed what it showed, and the surgeon explained what it meant, and the insurance company sent the denial letter, and all of my exceptional preparedness ran directly into the specific wall that exceptional preparedness cannot climb. The wall where the problem costs more money than you have, and more money than you can make, and more money than anyone you know has either. I had been sitting in that waiting room for 6 hours when the man in the black suit sat down beside me. Not beside me exactly. There were 40 chairs in the waiting room and perhaps 12 people in them, and he chose the chair 2 seats to my left, which was not beside me, but was close enough that I registered him the way you register anything that disrupts the ambient environment of a place you've been sitting in for a long time. He was Korean. He was tall, even sitting. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent, and he was alone. And he was looking at his phone with an expression that was not the expression of a person receiving bad news, but of a person solving a problem, working something through with the focused attention of a man who is accustomed to solving problems and merely finds this one more complicated than most. I looked at him for approximately 4 seconds and then looked back at the wall in front of me, where I had been conducting a silent negotiation with the universe for the past several hours, offering various forms of personal sacrifice in exchange for Marcus being okay, which was not a productive use of my time, but was the only currency I had left. A hospital administrator had come to speak with me an hour earlier. She had a kind face and a gentle voice, and she had explained, with the specific careful compassion of someone who delivers this particular news regularly, that the surgery could not be performed until financial arrangements were confirmed, and that the hospital had resources available, charity funds and payment plans, but that these took time to process, and the surgery was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and the timeline was she paused, challenging. $43, 7 a.m., 62,000. You're calculating something, the man in the black suit said. I turned to look at him. He was looking at me now, not his phone. His eyes were very dark and very direct, and they held an alertness that was not casual curiosity, but something more like assessment. The way a very intelligent person looks at a situation they are deciding whether to involve themselves in. "Excuse me," I said. "You've been staring at that wall for 6 hours," he said. "And the expression on your face has been changing in patterns that suggest calculation. Not grief. Not fear, exactly. Calculation." He paused. "I've been watching." "That's," I started. "Concerning, I know," he said, without any apparent concern. "But I find myself in an unusual position tonight, and I am a person who notices things, and what I have noticed about you is that you are very intelligent and very desperate, and those two qualities together are relevant to my situation." I stared at him. "My name is Kim Soo-hyun," he said. "I need something that you might be willing to provide, in exchange for something you very clearly need." The universe, it turned out, had been listening after all. It just had a very strange sense of how to answer. If you just stumbled onto this channel, welcome. And if this opening has already reached somewhere inside you, please subscribe before we go any further. We tell the stories that don't have easy shapes. Drop your name and your city in the comments right now. People are watching this from everywhere, and we want to find each other. Now, back to that hospital waiting room. Back to Zara. Back to the moment everything changed. I did not say yes immediately. I want to be clear about that, because the version of me that says yes immediately to a stranger in a hospital waiting room who has been watching her for 6 hours is not a version of me I recognize or endorse. I said, "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "You've been watching me for 6 hours, which is unusual, yes." I was going to say alarming. "Also fair," he said. He seemed entirely unbothered by my characterization of his behavior, which was itself alarming in a different way, the unbotherance of someone who operates by a different set of social rules than the ones I had grown up understanding. I was in this waiting room for a different reason. My associate was in surgery. I noticed you approximately 4 hours ago. I've been deciding since then whether to speak to you." "What decided you?" He looked at me. Something shifted in his expression, not softened exactly, but changed. "You haven't cried," he said. "You've been here for 6 hours, alone, calculating something that is clearly very serious, and you haven't cried once. And about 40 minutes ago, you got up and walked to the window and you stood there for 5 minutes, and I could see your reflection, and you were rebuilding. Something had collapsed and you were putting it back together, piece by piece, standing at that window. And I thought, that is a person with genuine strength, the kind I need." I looked at him for a long time. "What do you need?" I asked. He told me. The short version: Kim Soo-hyun was 32 years old, the head of a business organization that he described as comprehensive in a tone that suggested the word was doing significant work. He had a family situation. His grandfather, the patriarch of the Kim family, a man of 81 who had built something from nothing and who held strong opinions about everything, including the marital status of his eldest grandson, was ill. The illness was serious. The grandfather had one remaining wish that was within the realm of human fulfillment: to see Su Hyun married before he died. Su Hyun was not married. Su Hyun did not have a girlfriend. Su Hyun had, by his own admission, spent the past 10 years so focused on building and protecting his organization that personal relationships had been, he paused, looking for the word, deprioritized. The grandfather had perhaps 3 months. "You need a fake wife," I said. "A convincing one," he said. "For approximately 3 months, possibly less. You would need to live in my residence, attend family events, be present and plausible. I have people who can brief you on the family, on me, on what would be expected. You would be compensated." He named a number. The number was $100,000. The number was not $62,000. The number was $100,000, which was $62,000 plus $38,000, which was $38,000 more than I needed, which was, my brain did the arithmetic before I could stop it, my brother's surgery plus 3 months of the bills that would accumulate while he recovered plus enough left over to actually breathe. "Why me?" I asked. "You could have, there are agencies, I assume, for this kind of—" "I don't trust agencies," he said. "Agencies involve contracts and contracts involve paper and paper involves exposure. I trust people I've assessed directly." A pause. "I've assessed you for 4 hours. You're intelligent, you're controlled, you're motivated, and you have something specific to protect. People with something specific to protect are reliable. You don't know anything about me." "I know your brother's name is Marcus," he said. "I know his surgery is tomorrow morning. I know your insurance denied coverage and the bill is $62,000, and you have been doing math in your head for 6 hours that doesn't add up." He paused, and something that might have been the beginning of discomfort crossed his face. "I had my assistant look into your situation while I was deciding." I went very still. "You had your assistant. I understand that's a violation," he said. "I'm aware. But I needed to know whether what I was about to offer was actually what you needed, and whether you were a person I could trust, and I don't make decisions based on incomplete information." He met my eyes. "I apologize for the method. I don't apologize for the care." I sat with that for a moment. The care. He had framed it as care, and the strange thing, the thing that probably should have alarmed me more than it did, was that it didn't feel entirely wrong. It felt like someone who operated in a world where the normal rules of privacy and boundaries had been replaced by different rules, rules built around information and assessment and a particular ruthless variety of thoroughness. "If I say no," I said, "then I find someone else and you find another solution," he said. "My knowing about your situation doesn't obligate you. I'm not using it as leverage. I'm using it as context." "What's the difference?" "Leverage implies threat," he said. "I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a transaction." I looked at the wall. I looked at the $43 I could feel in my bank account the way you feel a bruise. I thought about Marcus, 19 years old, who had a full basketball scholarship to Ohio State that he would lose if this surgery didn't happen, who had never asked me for anything, who used to sleep with his basketball because he loved it that much, who had cried exactly once in front of me in the past 10 years And it was the day our father left, and he was 9 years old, and I had held him and told him it would be okay, and I had spent the following 19 years making that promise true by any means available. 3 months, I said. Possibly less. I need the first payment before Marcus's surgery. Before 7 a.m., he reached into his jacket. He produced a phone. He typed something. He showed me the screen, a wire transfer, $65,000, account details pending my information. Tonight, he said, as soon as you give me the account number. I looked at the screen, I looked at him. You were going to say yes before I did, I said. I was fairly confident, he admitted. That's arrogant. That's accurate, he said, and the corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Almost. I gave him my account number. He sent the transfer. Marcus had his surgery at 7:15 the following morning, and it went well. And when he woke up and I was sitting beside his bed, he looked at me with the specific look of someone who has been unconscious, but is not surprised to find me there, and he said, "Z, what did you do?" "Nothing," I said. "Go back to sleep." "Z, Marcus, sleep." He slept. I sat beside him, and I thought about the man in the waiting room and the number he had named and the 3 months ahead of me. And I understood for the first time the specific vertigo of having solved a problem in a way that creates 10 new problems, each of which is more complicated than the one you started with. I moved into Kim Soo-hyun's house on a Saturday. House is not the right word. It was a property, a compound, really, in the hills above the city, walled and gated and staffed. The kind of place that exists in the category of things you know are real but have never personally encountered. The main residence was understated in the way that very expensive things sometimes are: clean lines, natural materials, art that didn't announce itself, space that breathed. It was nothing like my apartment, which was loud with the presence of my life, photographs and books, and the particular cheerful chaos of a person who has never had enough room. A woman named Grace met me at the door. She was Korean, 50-something, and she had the manner of someone who had seen everything and had organized her responses to everything into an efficient filing system. She showed me to my rooms, plural, a bedroom and a sitting room and a bathroom that was larger than my kitchen. And she told me that Mr. Kim would meet with me at 6 o'clock to go over the family briefing, and that in the meantime I should make myself comfortable. I sat on the edge of the bed in the room that was temporarily mine, and I looked around and I thought, what have I done? Not with regret. It wasn't regret. It was more like the feeling of having jumped from a height, the moment when you are already in the air and the ground is coming and the decision is made and all that remains is the landing. At 6 o'clock, Kim Soo-hyun came to the sitting room. He was in different clothes, still a dark color, still precise, but without the jacket, his collar open, and this small informality made him look different in a way I hadn't expected. More present. Less constructed. He had 2 folders and a woman with him, a petite Korean woman named Dr. Yoon, who was apparently a family historian and social consultant, which was a combination of professions I had not previously known existed. Dr. Yoon was brisk and efficient, and she went through the family with the thoroughness of someone preparing a witness for court. The Kim family, the grandfather, Kim De-young, 81, founder of what had begun as a logistics company 40 years ago and had grown into something considerably more complex and considerably less entirely legitimate. 3 sons. Soo Hyun's father, the eldest, now semi-retired, deferred to by his brothers. 2 uncles with varying degrees of involvement in the family business. Aunts who paid attention to different things than their husbands did. Cousins, 7 of them, ages ranging from 16 to 35, who occupied various positions in the family hierarchy. The family will be skeptical, Dr. Yoon said. Soo Hyun has never brought anyone home. Ever, they will ask questions. What kind of questions? How you met? How long? Why you? She looked at me with the assessing quality of someone taking inventory. The why you will be the hardest. Not because of who you are, the family is not, she paused, choosing words, they are not unacquainted with the world outside their community. But because Soo Hyun is specific, he is particular, they will want to understand what particular thing about you captured his attention. I looked at Soo Hyun. He was looking at the folder in front of him. What particular thing? I asked. He looked up. I'll tell them the truth, he said. Which is? That you were the most controlled person in a room full of pain, he said, and that it interested me. Dr. Yoon made a note. I looked at Soo Hyun for a moment longer than was strictly necessary and then looked back at my folder. We spent 3 hours going through it. The family history. The story of how we met, adjusted slightly, the hospital setting replaced by a charity event, the transaction replaced by a conversation, the desperation replaced by coincidence. The timeline of our relationship, 4 months which was short but not inexplicably so. Details that made it real. The restaurant where we had our first date, which Soo Hyun described as though he had been there, and which I realized he was describing from memory, which meant he had actually been there, which meant the cover story had elements of his actual life. Do you want to know things about me? I asked at one point. Real things, so you can answer questions. He looked at me. Yes, he said. So I told him. About Cincinnati. About my mother, who was alive and well and currently working double shifts at a nursing home and did not know what I was doing and would not be told. About Marcus. About the basketball scholarship and the surgery and the 7 months it had taken me to save the money I had saved before the insurance denial had made the savings irrelevant. About my job, I was a graphic designer, freelance, which meant I was good at it, but the goodness was not always sufficient to cover the cost of my life. He listened the way he had listened in the waiting room, with the full, active quality of a person who is actually processing what they hear. He asked questions that were specific rather than performative. He remembered details I mentioned in passing and referred back to them. At the end of the 3 hours, Dr. Yoon left and we sat in the sitting room with the remains of the tea that Grace had brought and the city visible through the window below us. And Soo Hyun said, "There are things you should know about me. Real things." "Okay," I said. He was quiet for a moment. I had the sense of someone choosing what to reveal and how much, not out of deception, but out of a careful relationship with disclosure that had been built over many years of operating in a world where information was power and oversharing was danger. My grandfather built the foundation of what we have through methods that were not always legal, he said. When I took over, 8 years ago, I began moving the organization toward legitimacy. It's a process. It's not complete. A pause. There are people who would like to see me fail, within the family and outside it. If they discover this arrangement is false, the consequences would not be limited to embarrassment. What kind of consequences? The kind that would complicate your life significantly, he said, which is why I need this to be convincing. And if they don't discover it, then in 3 months or less, we dissolve the arrangement quietly. You return to your life. I return to mine. I looked at him. You've thought about all the ways this could go wrong. I think about all the ways everything could go wrong, he said. It's how I've stayed alive. The word alive landed differently than I expected, not as hyperbole, as a statement of historical fact. Okay, I said, then we should be very good at this. Yes, he said, we should stay with this story. Because what I'm about to tell you, what happened in the first week in that house, is where this stops being a transaction and starts being something neither of us had a name for yet. Subscribe right now if you haven't. Tell us in the comments, have you ever agreed to something you didn't fully understand and found something unexpected on the other side? Drop your city. We're reading everything. Now, back to the compound. Back to week 1. The first family event was a Sunday dinner, 6 days after I moved in. I want to tell you that I was prepared because I had spent 6 days with Dr. Yoon and her folders and Soo Hyun's patient, detailed briefings, and I knew every family member's name and personality and likely line of questioning. But preparation and readiness are different things, and I understood the difference the moment I walked into the Kim family dining room with Soo Hyun's hand at the small of my back, and 12 pairs of Korean eyes turned toward me with the particular intensity of people whose family system has just been disrupted by a variable they didn't see coming. The grandfather was at the head of the table. Kim D-young was a small man who had become smaller with age but had retained, clearly, the quality that had built an empire. A focused, penetrating attention that took in everything and revealed nothing. He looked at me when I entered, and his look lasted exactly 4 seconds, and then he looked at Soo Hyun, and whatever passed between them was swift and wordless, and then he gestured to the chairs beside him. "Sit," he said, in Korean, which Soo Hyun translated for me smoothly, and we sat. The dinner was 3 hours long, and it was, without question, the most sustained social performance of my life. The aunts asked questions about my family, my work, my background. I answered them with the cover story and with the truth wherever the truth was compatible with the cover story, which was more often than I had expected because Soo Hyun and I had spent 6 days talking, and the real version of my life was not incompatible with the version of my life that could be presented here. One of the uncles, the second one, younger, sharper, asked Soo Hyun directly, "How long have you been hiding her?" "I wasn't hiding her," Soo Hyun said. He said it with an ease that I recognized as controlled performance, and that would have been identifiable as such to anyone who knew him, but none of them seemed to know him the way I was beginning to. I was being careful. Careful, the uncle repeated, with a skepticism that was not quite hostile but was definitely probing. "She matters," Soo Hyun said, simple, final. the tone of a man who does not elaborate on things that are not in question. The uncle looked at me. I held his gaze with the expression I had spent 6 days practicing, warm but not eager, secure but not arrogant, the expression of a woman who is genuinely in love and genuinely confident in that love and therefore has nothing to prove. "She has good eyes," the uncle said, finally in Korean. Soo Hyun translated. "He says you have good eyes." "Tell him thank you," I said. He did. The uncle nodded. Something shifted at the table, not acceptance, not yet, but the first movement toward it. The grandfather spoke to me at the end of dinner. Directly, through Soo Hyun's translation, leaning forward with the focused attention of a man who has built his life on reading people. "He asks what you love about my grandson," Soo Hyun murmured. I looked at the grandfather. And then I looked at Soo Hyun, and I thought about what was true and what was cover story and where the line between them was, and I said because 6 days of Soo Hyun's careful, thorough, surprising realness had given me material that was not false. "He pays attention," I said. "In a world where most people are performing attention, he actually pays it. He sees things other people miss and he does something about what he sees." I paused. I have not always been seen. He saw me. Soo Hyun translated. The grandfather listened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Soo Hyun and said something in Korean that Soo Hyun did not translate. "What did he say?" I asked later in the car. Soo Hyun was quiet for a moment. He said, "Don't be an idiot and lose her." I looked out the window at the city moving past. "He's perceptive." "He always has been," Soo Hyun said. And his voice had something in it that it didn't usually have, something that was not the controlled professional tone I had catalogued, but something lower and more complicated. And I filed it and did not say anything about it, because I was only 6 days in and there was a great deal I did not yet understand. Over the following weeks, a shape emerged. The shape was this. Kim Soo Hyun, in private, was not the man I had expected. This sounds obvious. We never expect people to be who they turn out to be. But the gap between expectation and reality in his case was wide enough to be disorienting. I had expected control. I got that. I had expected intelligence. I got that too. I had expected a man who was comfortable with power and uncomfortable with vulnerability, which is the most common configuration of men who have done the things required to lead the kind of organization he led. What I had not expected was his greenhouse. On the 3rd floor of the compound, behind a door I had assumed was a storage room, there was a glass-enclosed greenhouse that ran the entire length of the building. It was full of plants, not decorative plants, not the kind of plants that exist to demonstrate that you have a space worth filling, but plants that had been cared for over time, plants in various states of growth and recovery, plants that were clearly tended by someone who paid attention to them. On the shelves were small handwritten labels identifying varieties, dates planted, notes on conditions. I found it on my 7th day because I was looking for a book I had left somewhere and I opened the wrong door. He was in there, in jeans and a plain t-shirt which I had not seen him in before, crouching beside a shelf of small orchids with a misting bottle. He looked up. He was not embarrassed. He just looked at me with the calm alertness he brought to most things. "You found the greenhouse," he said. "I didn't know it existed." "Most people don't," he said. He went back to the orchids. I stepped inside. The air was different, warm, humid, green in a way that was almost a physical quality, like the color itself had mass. I walked along the shelves slowly, reading the handwritten labels. Dates going back years, notes in both Korean and English. "You write in English in here," I said. "I learned English before I learned to be careful," he said. "Old habits." I stopped at a shelf near the back. There was a plant that was clearly struggling, its leaves yellowing, its stems thin. Beside it, a label that said in English, "Trying, what's this one?" I asked. He came and stood beside me. He looked at the plant. "I got it 2 years ago," he said. "It was nearly dead when I got it. I've been negotiating with it." Negotiating? Trying different things, adjusting. It's still here, which is something. I looked at the label. Trying. "You labeled it with what you're doing," I said. "It seemed more honest than a name it might not survive to grow into," he said. I stood there in the greenhouse with the warm green air around us and this man who ran an empire and negotiated with struggling plants and wrote in English in his private space, because it was from before he learned to be careful, and I thought, I did not expect you at all. If you're feeling something right now, that thing in your chest that happens when a story shows you something real, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Tell someone who needs it. And drop your name and city in the comments because we are building something here, a community of people who believe the complicated stories are worth telling. Now, back to Zara. Because things are about to get very complicated. The complication arrived in the form of a woman named Min Jae-yeon. She appeared at the compound on a Wednesday evening, unannounced, in a white dress and a cloud of expensive perfume and the particular confidence of someone who believes their arrival is always welcome. She was Korean, beautiful, about my age, and she looked at me when Soo Hyun introduced us with an expression that was so precisely calibrated to appear friendly while communicating absolute territorial warning that I had to admire the craftsmanship even as it made my stomach tight. "Zara," she said, as though tasting my name and finding it interesting. "I've heard so much about you." "I haven't heard about you at all," I said, pleasantly. Something flickered in her eyes. Later, when she was gone, I asked Soo Hyun. His expression was controlled in the specific way it got when something was complicated. "We dated," he said, "for approximately 8 months 4 years ago." She didn't look like someone who considers it past tense. "She doesn't," he agreed. "Her family and mine have a business relationship. She has expectations that I have never confirmed but also never fully disabused her of, which was my failure." "What kind of expectations?" He looked at me. "The kind you're here to replace." I understood then. Jae-yeon was not just an ex-girlfriend. She was the family's candidate. The person the aunts approved of, the person the uncles had factored into their business calculations, the person who had been waiting at the end of a path that Soo Hyun had never quite committed to walking but also never officially abandoned. And I was the disruption. "Does your grandfather know about her?" I asked. "Yes." "Does he like her?" A pause. "He finds her appropriate," Soo Hyun said. "He has not found her necessary, which is a different thing." "What does that mean?" "It means he wants me to be happy," Soo Hyun said, "and he has never been convinced she would make me happy, and he has been hoping for someone who might." He looked at me, and the look held something that I was beginning to catalog but had not yet named. He told my father after Sunday dinner that you were the first person he had ever seen make me look like someone who had something to lose. The kitchen was very quiet. He said that, I said. Yes. And is it true? He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the kitchen counter and then at the window and then at me, and the look was the longest and most uncalibrated thing I had seen from him, as though he had forgotten, for a moment, to edit before expressing. I'm starting to think it might be, he said. I went to my rooms. I sat on the edge of the bed that was temporarily mine, and I pressed my palms flat against my thighs, and I thought, with a clarity that was almost clinical, "You are in trouble, Zara Mitchell." The specific trouble of feeling something that was not in the contract. Jae-yeon did not disappear. She came back, twice in the following week, with reasons that were technically about family business but were operationally about establishing presence. She was charming to Soo Hyun in the specific way of someone who has a long history with a person and is using that history as currency. She was pleasant to me in the specific way of someone who considers you a temporary inconvenience. The second time she came, I came downstairs to find them in the living room, and the tableau was she was sitting close, angled toward him, her hand on his arm in the casual intimacy of a gesture that was doing significant work. He was listening with the controlled politeness of a man who is too careful to be rude and too careful to be encouraging. He looked up when I came in. And the thing that happened to his face, the thing I was not supposed to notice, the thing I filed immediately under the category of information I was not sure what to do with, was a brief, complete relaxation, like a door opening in a wall you hadn't known was a wall. Jae-yeon saw it too. Her eyes went from him to me and back to him, and she recalibrated in real time, and the recalibration was fascinating and terrible because she was doing what very intelligent people do when they encounter a threat they hadn't calculated. She was reassessing the weight of it. "Zara," she said, with a warmth that was a precisely constructed weapon. "You must find this all so overwhelming. Coming into a family like ours, a world like this." A pause. "It takes time to understand how things work here." "I learn quickly," I said. "I'm sure you do," she smiled. Soo Hyun has always appreciated quick learners. He gets bored so easily when people stop surprising him. It was masterfully done. In 3 sentences, she had suggested I was overwhelmed, implied my position was temporary, and planted the specific fear that I was already becoming boring to a man who disposed of boring things. I smiled back. "Then it's lucky," I said, "that I'm consistently surprising." Soo Hyun said nothing. He was watching the exchange with the focused attention of someone observing something that interests them. Jae-yeon left 20 minutes later. When the door closed behind her, Soo Hyun looked at me. "She's afraid of you," he said. "She should be strategic, not afraid," I said. "Fear makes people sloppy." "You think she's going to make a move?" "I think she already is," I said. "The question is what move?" He studied me. "You're thinking about this as a problem to solve, aren't you?" "Yes," he said, "but you've lived in my house for 3 weeks and you're thinking about my problems as your problems, and I want to know when that happened." I opened my mouth, closed it. The honest answer was, gradually and then suddenly, the way most important things happen. Somewhere between the greenhouse and the Sunday dinners and the 3 a.m. conversations when neither of us could sleep and we had ended up in the kitchen. Him making tea with the focused attention he gave everything, me sitting on the counter, both of us talking about things that had nothing to do with the arrangement. "It happened," I said. "That's all." He nodded. He didn't press. But something between us had been named, even without naming it. And after that, the quality of the air in every room we shared was different, charged with the specific electricity of two people who are aware of something and are choosing, for various reasons, not to yet act on it. Jae-yeon's move came on a Thursday. I found out about it from Grace, who came to my rooms with her efficient filing system manner and told me, with the specific care of someone who is delivering information they know is going to land hard, that there had been a family meeting that morning that I had not been invited to. That Min Jae-yeon had attended, that her father had come, that the subject of the meeting had included, among other things, the suggestion that Soo Hyun's sudden engagement was irregular, that the timeline was suspicious, and that certain inquiries made to certain people had produced certain information that the family might want to consider. I sat very still. "What information?" I said. Grace was quiet for one moment too long. "Grace," I said. "She had someone look into you," Grace said. "She found the hospital. She found the dates. She found that the timing of your relationship with Mr. Kim and the timing of your brother's surgery and the payment that was made," she stopped. I understood. She had built the map of the transaction. Not all of it, she couldn't have all of it, but enough. Enough to suggest. Enough to plant doubt. Enough to present to a family already skeptical of a woman they'd never heard of who had appeared from nowhere and disrupted 12 years of accumulated expectation. I sat with this for 45 seconds. And then I got up. I went downstairs. The family meeting was apparently still in progress, voices audible from behind the closed doors of the formal sitting room. I stood outside those doors for exactly 3 seconds, which was the amount of time it took me to decide that the alternative to walking in was unacceptable. I opened the doors. Soo Hyun was on his feet. He had been standing when I came in, which told me the meeting had been tense. His father, his uncles, an aunt. Jae-yeon and her father, who I had not met before, a heavy-set man who had the bearing of someone accustomed to winning arguments. Everyone looked at me. Jae-yeon's expression held a satisfaction she was not quite concealing. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said. I was not sorry. "I understand there are questions about me. I think I should be here for them." Soo Hyun looked at me. In his expression was something complicated, alarm on my behalf, and beneath the alarm, something that looked like awe, and beneath the awe, a calculation that I could see him making in real time. "Zara," he started. "Let me," I said. I looked at Jae-yeon's father. "What would you like to know?" he asked, with the directness of a man who has won arguments by frontal attack. "Is this relationship real?" The room held its breath. I had, in the 45 seconds I sat upstairs and in the 3 seconds I stood outside the door, thought about this question and its answers. The transactional answer was no, and the transactional answer would end this. The entirely false answer was yes, and the entirely false answer was what I had been brought here to give and was what the contract required. But I had lived in this house for 3 weeks. I had sat in the greenhouse and talked about negotiating with struggling plants. I had been in the kitchen at 3 a.m. and learned the particular way Soo Hyun made tea and the specific things he looked like when he forgot to be careful. I had sat across from his grandfather and said things about being seen that were not false. I looked at Jae-yeon's father, and then I looked at Soo Hyun. Yes, I said. And something about the way I said it, the way I was looking at Soo Hyun when I said it, the specific quality of the yes, which contained more truth than I had intended to put in it, made it land differently than a performed affirmation. It landed like something real because it was reaching toward something real, and the reaching was visible. Soo Hyun looked at me. The room looked at us looking at each other. The grandfather, who had been silent in his chair in the corner, made a sound. Not words. A sound of someone who has seen what they needed to see. Jae-yeon's father looked at his daughter. Something in the exchange between them was a recalculation. A hospital payment, Jae-yeon said clearly into the silence. Made by Soo Hyun, $65,000, the same week this relationship was supposedly confirmed. It wasn't a payment, Soo Hyun said. His voice was perfectly controlled. It was a gift. To the family of the woman I intend to marry. Her brother needed surgery. I ensured he received it. The room absorbed this. You're saying that's a normal thing, one of the uncles said. I'm saying it's what I did, Soo Hyun said. For someone who matters to me, interpret it however you choose. Jae-yeon looked at me. Her satisfaction had been replaced by something else, a reassessment, an uncertainty, the specific discomfort of someone who has played a card they were confident in and watched it fail to do what they expected. After the family left, after Jae-yeon and her father left, and the uncles left, and the grandfather was helped to his rooms, and the house was quiet, Soo Hyun and I stood in the formal sitting room and did not speak for what was probably 90 seconds and felt longer. You didn't have to come in there, he said. I know. It was a risk. I know. Why did you do it? I looked at him. At the man who had watched me in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours and seen something worth approaching. At the man who labeled struggling plants trying, because it was more honest than names they might not survive to grow into. At the man who had, over 3 weeks of proximity and 3 a.m. kitchens and Sunday dinners and greenhouse silence, made himself so unexpectedly real that the arrangement had become, at some point I couldn't identify precisely, not entirely the thing I had agreed to. Because, I said, you gave me something specific to protect. He looked at me for a very long time, and then he said, I think I need to tell you something. Okay. The arrangement, he said, the 3 months, I told you it was about my grandfather. A pause. That's true, but it's not the only reason I sat down next to you in that hospital. I waited. I sat down next to you, he said, because I had been looking at you for 4 hours and I had felt something that I haven't felt in a very long time, which is the specific wanting of a person's company that has nothing to do with utility. And I told myself it was strategic, that you were the right person for the arrangement for rational reasons, because strategic I know how to act on. He stopped. The other thing I didn't know how to act on. The room was very quiet. The other thing, I said. Yes, which is? He looked at me with the uncalibrated look I had first seen in the kitchen, the one without the edit. That I wanted to know you, he said, for reasons that have nothing to do with what you can do for me. I had spent my life managing things, problems and bills and my brother's future and my mother's exhaustion and the particular economics of never quite having enough. I had built myself into someone who anticipated and solved and maintained, and I had done it well, and the cost had been, I was only now understanding the cost, a kind of loneliness so ambient that I had stopped recognizing it as loneliness and started experiencing it as just the normal temperature of my life. Soo Hyun was looking at me. He was not managing anything. He was just there in the room saying the true thing. Me too, I said, for the same reasons. We're getting close to the ending of this story, but the ending is not where you think it is. There's one more thing that happens, one thing that neither Zara nor Soo Hyun saw coming, that changes the shape of everything. Subscribe right now. Tell us your city. Share this with one person, because what happens next is the reason this story exists. Stay. The grandfather died on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I moved in. Not unexpectedly, the doctors had been clear about the timeline, and the decline over the final 2 weeks had been visible and gentle in the way that some deaths are, a gradual lowering rather than a sudden stop. Soo Hyun was with him. I was in the greenhouse, which is where I had taken to going in the mornings, because the warm green air had become, in 6 weeks, one of the specific comforts of this temporary life. Grace came to get me. She didn't say anything. She just stood in the greenhouse doorway and looked at me, and I knew. I went to Soo Hyun. He was sitting in his grandfather's room, in a chair beside the empty bed, in the specific stillness of a person who has just been through something that has rearranged the landscape. I sat beside him, and I did not say anything, because there was nothing to say, and I had learned that Soo Hyun did not want words when silence was more accurate. We sat there for a long time. After a while he said, he told me something at the end, 2 days ago when he could still talk clearly. I waited. He said he knew, Soo Hyun said, about the arrangement, about the hospital, about how it started. The air in the room changed. He knew, I said. He knew from the second dinner, Soo Hyun said. He said he had been reading people for 80 years, and he could tell the difference between a woman performing love and a woman who was beginning to feel it, and that I had brought you in as one thing and you were becoming another, and that he didn't care how it started. His voice was very controlled and also very close to not being controlled, the specific sound of a man holding something large. He said, however it started, you look at her like she's the only solid thing in the room. And that was all he needed to know. I pressed my lips together. He knew, I said again, quietly. He knew, and he was glad, Zara. That was the word he used. Glad. Because he said I had spent 10 years building things that couldn't love him back, and you were the first thing I had brought into my life that could. I thought about the grandfather at the dining table, those dark, perceptive eyes taking me in for 4 seconds and then looking at Soo Hyun. About the thing he had said in Korean that Soo Hyun had translated, "Don't be an idiot and lose her." About the Sunday dinners and the question about what I loved about his grandson and the answer I had given that was more true than the arrangement required. He had known, and he had chosen to hold the knowledge quietly and let the thing grow inside the space he held for it. He gave us the 3 months, I said slowly. Not for himself, for us. Su Haiyan looked at me. His eyes were very bright and very steady. I think so, he said. Yes. The most controlled man I had ever met put his face in his hands and cried. And I did what you do when someone who has spent years being too careful to be held finally lets themselves be held. I put my arm around him and I held on and I let him be as large as what he was feeling required. The arrangement, technically, was over. The grandfather was gone. The stated purpose had been fulfilled. The contract, never written, existing only in the specific understanding between two people in a hospital waiting room, had reached its natural conclusion. Su Haiyan said this to me, gently and directly, 10 days after the funeral. We were in the greenhouse, both of us, which had become a place we went together without discussing going there, and he said, "The original terms are met. You are free to go back to your life. The remaining payment will be transferred by the end of the week." I looked at the plant labeled trying. Its leaves were greener than they had been 6 weeks ago. It was still here. Something had shifted in its negotiation. "Is that what you want?" I asked. He was quiet. "Su Haiyan," I said, "is that what you want?" "What I want," he said, with the careful precision of a man who is saying something he has thought about very thoroughly, "is to ask you to stay. Not for the grandfather, not for the family, not as an arrangement. As whatever this is that we didn't plan." A pause. "But I'm aware that what I'm offering is complicated. My world is complicated. The people in it are complicated. You came here for your brother, not for this, and I don't want to." "Su Haiyan," I said. He stopped. "The plant," I said, pointing to the trying label. "How long have you been negotiating with it?" 2 years. "And you kept adjusting, kept trying different things?" "Yes." "Because it was still here," I said, which was something. He looked at me. The greenhouse was warm and green around us, and through the glass above us the sky was very blue and very present. "Yes," he said. "I'm still here," I said, which is something. The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile, and then not almost. The full, actual thing, which I had seen perhaps 4 times in 6 weeks and which remained, each time startling and entirely worth waiting for. "Yes," he said, "it is. I am going to tell you what happened next, and what happened after that, because you deserve the full shape of the story, not just the romantic center of it." What happened next? I did not move out. I stayed. We were careful, both of us, because the world Su Haiyan operated in required carefulness, and I was learning its specific demands. Jai Yon made one more attempt, a formal presentation to the family that the relationship was fraudulent, that the evidence was clear, that the family's interests required them to investigate. This was the moment that Su Haiyan brought me to his father and his uncles and said, with the precision and totality he brought to all important things, "She is staying. This is not a negotiation. Whoever does not accept this is choosing to leave, not her." His father, who had spent 12 years deferring to the patriarch and was still learning what to defer to in his absence, looked at his son for a long moment and then said, "Your grandfather would approve." Which was the whole answer. Jai Yon did not come back. The uncle who had doubted most became the one who advocated most, which is a pattern I have observed in families. The hardest skeptics, when they turn completely. The aunts took me to lunch, separately and then together, and asked questions that had nothing to do with cover stories, and I answered them with nothing but the truth, and the truth was sufficient. What happened after that? Marcus healed completely. He went back to Ohio State in January, and within 2 months of returning, he was starting, which his coach said was unusual for someone returning from his type of surgery, and which Marcus said was simply a matter of having something to come back to. He called me every Sunday, and in our Sunday calls, he heard the shape of what was happening without me saying it directly. The way brothers who know you hear between your sentences, and one Sunday he said, "Z, are you happy?" I thought about the greenhouse and the 3 a.m. kitchens and the Sunday dinners where I had learned to follow the family's conversation by its emotional temperature even before I understood the words. I thought about Soo Hyun in jeans in the greenhouse, and Soo Hyun in his suits in his office, and Soo Hyun at 3 a.m. making tea with the focused attention he gave everything, and Soo Hyun crying in his grandfather's room with his face in his hands and his guard entirely down, and the specific feeling of being next to all of those versions of the same person and feeling in each one that this was a place I wanted to be. "Yeah," I said. "I think I actually am." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. "You've been not happy for so long I was starting to forget what the other one sounded like on you." "It sounds like me," I said, "just more." "Yeah," he said, "it does." I want to tell you what I learned. Not the lessons that wrap up neatly, because those are not the real lessons, but the complicated ones that I'm still sitting with. I learned that desperation and wisdom are not opposites. I made the most important decision of my life in $43 circumstances from the floor of everything I had, and the decision was not in spite of the desperation, but somehow inside it, the right one. Desperation clarifies. It removes the luxury of performing consideration. You don't have time to ask yourself what other people would think. You ask yourself, what do I actually need? And sometimes the answer to that question, asked from the very bottom, is truer than anything you'd have arrived at from a comfortable altitude. I learned that the people who see you, who actually see you, not the version of you that reflects well on them or confirms their expectations, are rare. They are worth the complication they come with. They are worth the greenhouse and the 3 a.m. and the Korean family dinners and the specific challenges of a world that operates by rules you had to learn from scratch. They are worth the risk of staying in a room when every trained instinct says to leave, because you have spent your whole life leaving rooms that stopped being safe. And this one, for all its complexity, is safe in the specific way you most needed. I learned that love, real love, the kind that wasn't in the contract, does not announce itself. It accumulates. It is in the moments of doing your makeup in the bathroom mirror and hearing him in the greenhouse through the wall. It is in the specific way a person looks at you when you walk into a room full of people who are trying to remove you and they say, with their whole body, "You stay, and I stay with you." It is in the plant labeled trying that is still here, which is something, which is everything. And I learned this one is the hardest, and I'm still learning it, that the things that save us are rarely the things we asked for. I asked Marcus to be okay. The universe sent me a waiting room and a man in a black suit, and a transaction and a greenhouse and 3 months that were supposed to be an arrangement and became, instead, the beginning of the truest version of my life. The grandfather knew. He held the space and let it grow. I think about that a lot. About the people in our lives who see what we haven't admitted yet and hold the space for it quietly, patiently, knowing that some things cannot be rushed toward, that the negotiation has to happen at its own pace, that the plant will either be here or it won't, and that the trying is the thing. I am Zara Mitchell. I am 29 years old now, and I live in a house with a greenhouse and a man who makes tea at 3 a.m. and labels struggling plants with honesty instead of hope. My brother is starting for Ohio State, and my mother doesn't have to work double shifts anymore, and I have a home that I did not see coming from the floor of $43 and a hospital waiting room. And I have that other thing, the thing that was not in the contract, the thing that grew in the space the grandfather held for it, the thing I am still, every day, learning the full dimensions of. I have the specific, irreplaceable experience of being seen. By someone who was watching for 4 hours before he stood up. By someone who, when he finally spoke, said the truest thing, "You were the most controlled person in a room full of pain." And it interested me. I'm glad it did. I'm glad he did. That is the story, all of it. And if you stayed for every single word, thank you. That means something. This channel exists for the stories that don't fit neatly into the shapes we expect stories to have. The ones about the parking lots and the $43 and the waiting rooms and the strangers who turn out to be the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. If this story reached you, subscribe. Right now. We put out new stories every single week, and every single one is built for the people who need it most. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. We want to know where in the world you're watching from. People are watching this from Seoul to Chicago to Lagos to London, and every comment is read and every name matters. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. And to everyone who has ever agreed to something in desperation and found something extraordinary on the other side. The extraordinary was always coming. You just had to be desperate enough to walk toward the door. See you tomorrow.